What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to talk about the actor who played the character Chris in the movie Get Out. Alright, so I read an article I found an article from the Huffington Post. And I would like to read through it and kind of give my commentary on things. And it basically revolves around the actor Daniel Kaluuya. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. So yeah, it revolves around him and more or less his identity, both racial and culturally, and sometimes feeling like he's too black but also not black enough. A little strange about that, not black enough. Um, so yeah, I'm going to read through it. But before I read through, I just want to say that, okay, when I was watching the movie Get Out, like, I noticed the character Chris, like, right off the bat, and I noticed the way that he looked. It didn't, like, he looks black, obviously, but, it's sort of like a different type of black if you look at him, you know. I kind of, I didn't know anything about the actor before I watched, but for some reason I was like, okay, he's probably from, the motherland, he's probably Native African. Um, I was thinking like perhaps maybe Caribbean, but probably Native African. All right. And also, if you notice his friend in the movie, Rob, he's has like a dark complexion as well, but I didn't get that vibe from Rob. I think Rob is African American, I think. More or less, or probably from the Caribbean, right? All right, so I'm going to read this article. So here we go. All right, and this is from the Huffington Post. The title is Get Out star Daniel Kaluuya. I'm too black for Britain, not black enough for America. The actor says he resents Samuel L. Jackson's recent critique. Okay. Actor Daniel Kaluuya doesn't think he should have to prove his blackness. I kind of don't really think he should have to prove his blackness either, at least just based on the way he looks. I'm guessing there's a lot more that goes into that. But yeah, I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's black. I'm pretty sure. Right. In a new interview with GQ magazine, the Get Out star shared his thoughts on Samuel L. Jackson's recent critique that black British actors may not be able to relate to black Americans. All right, I've heard of this, but I haven't really looked into that. But yeah, I do remember hearing that Samuel L. Jackson said something. All right, for Daniel, or for Daniel Kaluuya, Sam Jackson's comments reflect his personal experiences of being ostracized in different settings for being dark-skinned. Okay, let's see. And Daniel's going to give some quotes in his experience. Quote unquote, when I'm around black people, I'm made to feel other because I'm dark-skinned, he said. Okay, so that's a bit strange right there. So he's around black people, and black people are like, no, you too dark. That's a little strange. I'm not discounting his experience or, saying that his experience is invalid or is a lie or anything like that. I wouldn't say that. But I'm just saying that's a bit strange to hear something like that, because when I look at him, his look is very African. It's very, like, if he isn't black, like, who is black? Like, who is black if he's not black? Let's see. I've had to wrestle with that, with people going, you're too black. So at one point, people are like, I'm guessing African American people or black people are looking at him like you're too black, and then he's in internal conflict with that because he's like, too black. Let's see. Then I come to America and they say, you're not black enough. All right, so now America says that this dude's not black enough, but most black people in America are probably not 100% black, and I'm pretty sure he's probably 100% black, if not like 99.99999% black. So I'm sure he's black. So I think we might be kind of like mixing cultural experience and racial experience perhaps together. So I think at one point the star Daniel was like, "Oh, these people look at my dark skin and say like I'm too black." So that is the too black part. But then when he comes to America, it's like, "Oh, you're not black enough because you don't really know about the black American experience." So I think that might be where he's coming from, and I think that he's kind of like mixing the two together, kind of like mixing the racial and the cultural together. And he should kind of specify that. Um, and as well, YouTube user Mr. Superboy 223 had mentioned that too. All right. So next, I go to Uganda. I can't speak the language. In India, I'm black. In the black community, I'm dark skinned. In America, I'm British. Well, okay. I kind of feel like he would have pretty much a stable racial identity no matter where he went. Like if he went to China, he would be black. If he went to Latin America, he would be black. If he went to Canada, he would be black. If he went to Europe, he would. I kind of think he would have a pretty much a standard racial identity, versus someone who is probably like racially ambiguous, whose racial identity would change based on the laws of the land and how they do race. But okay, this is his experience, so I don't want to come off as if I'm discounting his experience. But I just think it's a little strange. You know, I kind of think that he would have more or less this, not the same racial experience, but be considered the same race no matter where he's at, because his look is so like very specific. You know, there's not any ambiguity, racial ambiguity to it, um, or anything like that. All right. The actor went on to add that similar to Black Americans' vast range of social issues, the London's Black community has confronted oppression, prejudice, and police brutality. Okay, all right. Usually they like to paint London as like some post-racial place, but apparently it's not if you're dealing with police brutality, prejudice, and oppression. But yeah, like, oh, we're just, oh, we're one with the nation, one with the people, we're all dating each other, that thing. It's like, oh yeah, interracial dating is gonna end racism. Mixed kids are gonna end racism. I'm like, are you sure? I don't think so. I don't think so. Last time I checked, there's been interracial relationships and biracial mixed kids for centuries at least. And racism is still alive and well. All right, next. Since Samuel L. Jackson's much discussed statements, which drew criticism from British actor John Boyega, made headlines last week, Jackson told the Associated Press that his comments were not necessarily a slam towards the performers, but rather an assessment of how Hollywood works in an interesting sort of way sometimes. Okay, so Sam might be throwing not necessarily shade, but just trying to point something out because he may be feeling like, oh, these British actors are taking, Black Americans actors' jobs. These Black British actors are taking Black American actors' jobs. And on one hand, I can't really knock him totally for that because, they are kind of like cutting into his money. But then again, it does come off as a little shady, you know. And I guess it's like we should be together. We should, since we, all probably check the Black/African American box. We should be together. But I guess This is one of those situations when it comes to resources and when you try to get the money, that's when that togetherness it ain't so together no more. I tell you that. All right. The frustrating thing, let's say quote unquote the frustrating thing, in order to prove that I can play this role, I have to open up about the trauma that I've experienced as a black person, he said. Quote unquote, I have to show off my struggle so that people accept that I'm black. No matter that every single room I go to, I'm usually the darkest person there. I kind of resent that mentality. I'm just an individual. All right, so he said a lot of things there. So, the struggle in the black experience. Hmm. Oftentimes, we do relate the black experience to struggle. Even, or especially when we're talking about people who may identify as black but not look black. This is not the case with Daniel Kaluuya, but with some people who identify as black, particularly maybe people who are lighter skin or people who are racially ambiguous, etc. Sometimes people feel like these people or those people can't really relate to the experience of African Americans who don't share that experience with African Americans. So because of that experience or that lack of experience, you're not African American. Um, but I feel like the actor Daniel I like he could be a victim of police brutality. He could be discriminated against in the job market. He could be oppressed. Like I don't think white supremacists are looking at him and saying, "Oh, he's a Native African. Let's not work. Like let's not mess with him." Like if anything, they're probably like, "Oh, definitely get him." Um, so yeah, it does suck that sometimes we relate the black experience with struggle. Um, but I kind of understand why we do that. I think we do that because the struggle is what decides whether people are really down or whether people are just riding the wave, just riding the wave for the money or just for other things. But when it comes to the struggle, that's when things get real. That's when things are like, oh, you're like, oh, wow. It surprises you, and it's like you're either in or you're out when it comes to the struggle. You're down for black people, and you're gonna thug it out with them, or you're just a fair weather friend, and you're out. The weather is no longer fair. Let's see. And he also says, I have to, let's see, no matter that every single room I go to, I'm usually the darkest person there. I kind of resent that mentality. I'm just an individual. Okay. But that's the thing, though. You are like when any room you enter, people will know his racial identity. People aren't going to be like, I wonder if he's part Native American. Like, even if he is part Native American, in reality, people aren't going to really be checking that. People are going to be checking for the look that he gives off with his phenotype, the look, his like facial features, racial features, etc. And I'm not saying that he's lying, but I just find this whole situation a little strange that he's in a situation like this. I kind of feel like this situation would be more compatible with the experience of like maybe a mixed race person or a biracial person or maybe even a light skinned person. Um, or like racially ambiguous as well. But yeah, it's kind of strange that he's had this experience. Um, And perhaps he's maybe even encountered some African Americans who may have said, a little couple of shady things here or there. You know how sometimes some African American people can say a little, shady thing here and there about Native African people. And on the flip side, Native African people do sometimes have sort of a attitude towards African American people. I think sometimes they may have drinking the white supremacy Kool-Aid and may feel like, oh, these black Americans are low. They make us look bad, even though they don't know the whole story and what goes into that, and they may not know it, nor they may not care to know it. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and just say that they don't know it, but they think they know it. So it's like, okay, I know this story, and this is why you people act like this. But yeah, it does go both ways, because some Native African people have had experiences with African American people, and they have, said some little slick things here and there. You know, I had a coworker who went through something like that with another coworker. They were both at the same job, and it was sort of like a little shadiness because of him being a Native African. You know, on the flip side, that same coworker did say something shady about African American people. You know, so yeah, a little strange because I'm like, Daniel, he's like really dark. He has like really African features. So I'm like, how if you ain't black, who is black? If you ain't black, was like there's no hope for the rest of us, especially African American people. Not to be self-centered, but I'll draw from my own personal experience um, in regards to racial identity and the cultural identity. All right, so throughout my life, for the most part, I don't think any black person has point blanks. I don't think they've ever said you're not black. All right. In my personal experience, this is my personal experience, by the way. Disclaimer. All right. So in my personal experience, never encountered a black person that point blank said you're not black. I think they may have asked me about heritage, other heritages, other lineages, etc. But perhaps even ask me about, what race am I, how do I identify, what do I consider myself, etc. And I say, I consider myself black / African American, basically. And for the most part, no black person has ever challenged that in my personal experience. They've just accepted it and, you know, going on with life, And I was raised like in a majority black environment. Perhaps it may not sound like it or may not seem like it, but I was raised in a majority black environment. I just think I might lack, quote unquote, a black scent. So I think that may throw some people off. Um, and I know there's some other black people who probably have that similar experience too. But yeah, I was raised in a majority black area. Majority of the black people in the area are probably like brown skin. I was probably one of the few beige people in my area. There was a couple of beige folks up in the mix. But I never felt like there was especially when I was younger, I never felt like there was like a difference. I just felt like, hey, we all, we just black. Some people just beige, some people brown, some people dark, etc. Right? Um, Only until recently I really noticed, like, oh, I'm, kind of like the only beige person here. And even then, it's like, oh, all right, that's usually how it is anyway. All right, but to bring it back to this subject, so no black person has really ever point blank said I'm not black. They may have kind of like said perhaps the level of blackness, maybe alluded to that, like, oh, maybe you're not as black as the other person, but never just point blank said you're not black. Um, and you know, the few times that someone said that I'm not black, the few times that has happened, it usually came from people who weren't black, or pretty much, yeah, and who were outside of the community, who challenged, I guess, not challenged, but I guess challenged, for lack of a better a better word, I guess my claim to blackness, because I guess I don't quote unquote look like a black person, and there's a whole bunch of crap that goes into that. And also there's a whole bunch of crap that goes into people trying to kind of like distance people from blackness. You know? I think people do that a little bit with Beyonce, and they kind of like, oh, she's Creole, she's not black, because sometimes people outside of the community don't want to associate certain people with blackness because they feel like it's something negative. So it's like, oh, Beyonce's not black, she's Creole, or like, oh, Rihanna, she's part Irish, etc. Right? Or like, she's from the Caribbean. But yeah, ultimately, that was my experience. So I never really had, that kind of a experience, which is strange because it seemed like I would be the person to have more of an experience like that versus Daniel, you know. And as far as him being like the darkest person in the room, it may be the rooms that you're in. If they're making you quote unquote feel like the darkest person you're in, it may be the rooms that you're in. I feel like you might be in a lot of rooms with white people more so than black people. And also notice like white people weren't mentioned in this article. Notice that. That's a little strange too. Because it seemed like it was all directed towards black people. And that's not totally fair. Because white people are the ones who really even created this situation to begin with. So they need to be referenced too in this. I guess perhaps his his personal experience may not include white people, but I can't. If you in Britain, I'm pretty sure your personal experience in terms of race includes some white people. I could be wrong, but I feel like it does. As well as America, and as well as in the industry, the acting and movie industry, I'm pretty sure you ran into some white people. I'm pretty sure they tried to offer you some stereotypical roles as well. And I can understand some people's criticism with this actor, Daniel Kaluuya, because from what he said, it seemed like he's kind of like putting all the blame on black people, and that's not fair. Because there's more, like, he should have mentioned white people in this, and as well as other races of people. For some reason, I can't imagine that all his racial experiences revolve around black people. At one point, all my racial experiences did revolve around black people, just because I was just raised in a majority black area, went to a majority black school, lived in a majority black neighborhood, went to a majority black church, etc. Played with majority black people in the neighborhood, kids, etc. Right? Maybe that was his experience. For some reason, I don't think so, but maybe it is. I just find it a little strange that white people weren't mentioned in this article, and I think that that's a disservice because it kind of like puts the blame on black people, and it just makes black people look like they're just bad people and monsters. And while black people can be a little shady when it comes to Native African people, at the same, they can be a little shady, but when it comes down to it, like black American people have Native African people's back if they come here and they encounter some police brutality or some discrimination or anything like that. The same organizations that we use, Black Lives Matter, NAACP, Black Panthers, etc. You may have issues with those organizations, but they are organizations that advocate on behalf of black people, not just black Americans, but all like black people worldwide. So if he did encounter some problems, black people would have his back. Would white people have his back if he encountered some problems? Yeah, think about that. Well, I've gone on for long enough. I hope you were able to get something out of this. And I hope I didn't bore you for too long about this either. I hope this wasn't boring. If it was, my bad. If you enjoyed it, comment, like, subscribe, thumbs up. Thanks a lot for watching. Feel free to comment. Feel free to subscribe. Thanks a lot. Adios and goodbye for now.